Well, thank you, Stephanie, Lisa, and Tanya. I'm Ben. I'm so honored to be here. I'm excited to be here in Rhode Island with all of you, and I'm so impressed. I'm just sort of sitting here in awe of all of the work that you're already doing. So I hope that I have, by hearing our story in Nebraska, you can kind of compare and contrast to what you're doing, and it'll give you some ideas and be an inspiration, but I don't mean in any way to say that we have all the answers, because I know that there's a lot of great things happening in Rhode Island. So you may be asking yourself, why is a person from Nebraska here talking to us in Rhode Island? And so I titled the presentation, View from Another Small State. I was trying to find a hook. And I did Google our populations, and the population of Rhode Island, what I found was about 1 million people. And Nebraska is about 1.8. But those 1.8 people are spread out over a lot more land and a lot fewer beaches. So there are some differences, but as I said, I hope that our story, we've been down this road, we're still on this road, and that I can share some helpful thoughts and tools. A little bit about Nebraska Appleseed, just so you know where we fit into the stakeholder and advocacy space in Nebraska, and I'll be talking about this a little bit throughout the presentation. But as Lisa said, we're a nonprofit legal advocacy organization. In addition to child welfare, we do work in the areas of economic justice, healthcare access, and immigration. We have a staff of about 30, so for Nebraska, it's a pretty good-sized advocacy organization. We're celebrating our 20th year, but there were a lot of stakeholders involved in this process in Nebraska. That's really the kind of the moral of our story, and I'll share a little bit more about where we fit into that. I believe the PowerPoint will be available to the group electronically, so as you'll see, there's lots of links.
Yeah, there are actually copies of the PowerPoint materials right there on that.
There's hard copies, and then if you would get us them electronically, because there's links in here to some of the resources that if you would like to dig a little bit deeper. So I won't go into this because I think this group knows that there are unfortunately poor outcomes for young people that are transitioning from foster care to adulthood. And that's why programs like Extending Foster Care to 21 is a really great opportunity. And not just extended foster care, but there are a package of services and supports and opportunities available. But as this group probably knows, there's some great research out of the University of Chicago, Chapin Hall, that shows that particularly programs of extended foster care to 21 can really improve those outcomes and can bring a 2-to-1 return on the investment for young people in terms of reducing those poor outcomes. I won't go into this very in-depth either. There's a lot of information if you want to dig into it, but I think most of you are probably familiar, but just to kind of go over the basics to make sure we're all on the same page about the opportunity under Fostering Connections to extend foster care that allows states to draw down federal funding for young people who age out of foster care to 21. Under federal law, young people must be meeting one of those 5 education or work conditions. States must also extend adoption assistance or guardianship assistance for young people that enter into a guardianship or adoption or adopted at age 16 or older, so as not to create any disincentives to permanency. And then if states take federal funding, they must meet 40 requirements related to case planning and the case review process. And the Fostering Connections Act created this new placement setting called Supervised Independent Living Setting. So young people in extended foster care can either continue on in their foster home or can live independently. And the feds have provided a great deal of flexibility in terms of what those placement settings can look like. And I'm happy to talk more about what that looks like in Nebraska or answer any questions about that. In terms of the national picture, that says over half the states have extended foster care. I believe it's now 29 states. So come on, Rhode Island. I know you have before and are looking at doing it again. That says that 2 states currently allow young people with juvenile justice from the juvenile justice system to opt into the extension. I think that Virginia has also done so, but they're not doing it, drawing down 4E. And as you'll hear later in my presentation, this is something that Nebraska is working on. We had a bill last session to extend our program to juvenile justice population. It didn't move forward, but there will be a bill introduced in January, and we're hoping that will have that going forward. And then I think this might be the most useful thing that I brought from Nebraska to Rhode Island. I hope that this can be helpful. There are handouts of this, hard copies. This is a handout or a tool that I created with Jenny Falconer from the Juvenile Law Center, and then several advocates from California as part of a national conference that we presented at this fall. And basically what we did was we brainstormed kind of components of a model foster care system. And so the reason that it has draft written across it is because we didn't want to present it as an end-all be-all. It was just like our brainstorm of what our states have, what states we know about have, and what we wish that our states have. But we ended up like debating a lot and putting a lot of thought into it. So I hope it's a helpful document for you to look at. One of the versions is blank, so you can kind of fill it in if you would like. And then another one has columns for our 3 states, for Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and California. So you can see that none of our states have all of them. And you can also reference of those 3 states, what states do have what in case you're looking for a model or for more kind of technical assistance on those areas. But just to give a sense of it, some of what we think are model components of an extended foster care system include, does your state take all of the 5 education or work conditions? Some states that extend foster care, they only do it for young people who are, for example, in education or work. And so we think all 5 is ideal. Do you extend to juvenile justice population? One key that has gotten a lot of discussion is whether extension is automatic. So in Nebraska, young people can opt in. It's a voluntary program. Young people can opt in or opt out of the program at any time. This chart sort of says it's a best practice. I think a number of states, young people automatically are extended into foster care, but if they don't want to go in, then they can opt out of the program. There's a section about accountability, court oversight, right to counsel. Is there a grievance procedure for young people? Is there a youth involvement in the process, and in the development of the program and the implementation of it, and the outreach around the program? And I'll talk about Nebraska's experience, but I know it's hard to read all that, but hopefully that's something that can be useful to you going forward. And kind of moving into our experience and just telling a little bit about the story in Nebraska. We have a Prezi. I didn't know what a Prezi was. It's like a movable PowerPoint that we turned into a video. And I'm not going to show it because it's about 8 or 10 minutes long and we don't have time. But when you get the electronic version, if you want to, there's a link there that really tells the full story. There's videos of young people testifying and speaking at press conferences and like news clips. So it kind of is like a scrapbook of Nebraska's bill that created our extended foster care program. But since we don't have too much time, I'll kind of go through kind of the highlights of how our program was created. And I think you were saying that's Jacob, one of our young people. So just to give a little bit of background, as I said, about kind of what our advocacy and stakeholder landscape looks like. Nebraska Appleseed, we're not the Jim Casey site in Nebraska, that's the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. We're also not the Kids Count entity, that's Voices for Children in Nebraska. We're kind of like the legal watchdog, kind of the barky watchdog. I don't know if you have one of those. We're also, the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, which is our Jim Casey site, also is like Foster Forward, where they have our youth voice component. It's called, our youth advocacy group is called Project Everlast. And so in Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, our Jim Casey site also kind of works more directly with our state agency. We sue them sometimes. So we also do administrative advocacy with them, but they have kind of a closer relationship. So they have been working for a number of years with HHS, looking at our data on our outcomes. They have been hearing from the young people. At that time, we had an existing program called Former Ward. It sounds like, I know you were saying something, that you have a YES program. I don't know how similar it is. It was a very helpful program, but it had some limitations. Only young people that were going to college could participate in it. It had kind of limited casework support, and we weren't getting any federal funding for that program. And so our Jim Casey site, Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, and HHS decided to bring in Mainspring Consulting and to bring together a group of stakeholders to go through a process of talking about what a program of extended services and support in Nebraska would look like. So that stakeholders we had a series of meetings where we kind of talked about all of our different options, and then that informed the fiscal analysis that mainspring did for us as well. And really, I think that's the bottom line, is that initiative of bringing everybody together really created something that has continued beyond the creation of this program. We've applied it to the Strengthening Families Act implementation in Nebraska and a number of other initiatives that move forward. Previously, Appleseed and Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, we worked with them a little bit. Our overlap, it's so hard to think about that we weren't always like BFFs, because we did some work together, but there wasn't a ton of overlap until that happened. We also at the same time got a very small joint grant with them on homelessness issues. So I think that was really helpful in terms of us coming together and learning kind of what our expertise and what we had to offer, kind of legal, policy, technical expertise, a little bit of barking, their kind of collaborative data. It was just kind of a nice marriage of those, and the young people were really central to that process. So the process started in 2012 with, as I said, the mainspring program design and fiscal analysis process. We had focus groups and we did surveys with young people across the state and also stakeholders. So we got surveys from judges, from attorneys, from providers. They were part of the stakeholder group, but we did even broader. I think we had 250 surveys back from a broad range of stakeholders and focus groups with young people. We put that together in a report that we released publicly at a press conference. And then I'm so excited to see the young people here and learn about the work that The Voice is doing, because young people were really central in this process. They really led the effort. They were involved really in every aspect. It has been the highlight of my career to work with these young people. They were at the table during the mainspring. They were the ones that said we need this. They pushed from the beginning. They were at the table as part of the mainspring process as a program design analysis. When we had a draft bill, they went line by line through the bill. I'll never forget the day we had like about 8 young people in a conference room, and we went line by line through it, talked about what it meant. They gave feedback. We made changes on the bill based on what young people said, which was like kind of a really fun, challenging thing for the professionals that were working with them. And I think if you read our bill, which there are links here, you'll see that the youth input reflected in the language of the bill. I've had other states remark on that. They testified at the legislative hearings. They spoke at a press conference. They pulled senators off the floor during all 3 rounds of debate when the bill was heard by the legislature. They collected postcards from young people across the state and delivered them to the state senators. They wrote op-eds that were in our papers, just to name a few. They also named the program Bridge to Independence, and then they named the caseworkers in the program are called independence coordinators, because we want to signify that it's different than our age majority is 19, so I say under 19 caseworker, that it's a youth-directed model, and so we want to call those caseworkers something different. So the young people came up with the term independence coordinators, so we call those caseworkers in the Bridge to Independence program ICs. They're called independence coordinators. You can see this chart at the bottom that we have had. It was kind of interesting when I actually looked back on it. We have had 5 bills for the past 5 years. Initially, the first bill, there were 2 bills to establish the program. The first one, 1150, did not pass. We were kind of still in the mainspring process. Appleseed jumped the gun a little bit. We wanted to educate senators. Didn't move forward. The second time was introduced. It passed. That was LB 216. We had 2 cleanup bills, and now we've had 1 bill to extend to juvenile justice. It did not pass last year. It will be introduced, as I said, again in January. We had the same legislative champion for the first 2 bills to establish the program. Yes, and the first cleanup, and then she was term limited, and then we've had a new legislative champion for the second cleanup bill, and then both of the juvenile justice extensions. And we've had multiple interim studies to keep our legislature engaged on the issue. And there are links to the bills if you want to look at the language. Yeah?
Just tell me a little bit more about mainspring and getting the fiscal analysis. Did the group pay for a private consultant, or can you tell me a little bit more about that part?
Yeah.
And Jim Casey has offered it to Rhode Island free of charge.
Yeah, so it's Jim Casey paid for that through the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, our Jim Casey site. And so they have 2 experts.
The coalition you asked for it, or the state?
The Jim Casey site asked for it, and they were kind of the host. And I think they had to have the state agency on board because they had to have good data from HHS about how much do your caseworkers cost, how many young people age out every year. So we had to have HHS on board to want to know that and to provide that data. So NCFF, again, the Jim Casey site was the host and coordinated it and brought together the stakeholders. I don't think it would have to happen that way here, but they were the ones that brought them in, but I think it would. And then HHS was involved in it. Yeah, and so, and then that, as you can imagine, was very valuable to our legislature. And the fiscal note for the bill was based off of mainspring analysis. Not at first. We had to kind of go back and forth, but we had some phone calls between mainspring and the fiscal office of the legislature. Even with some amendments, they were very helpful. And it was helpful from the beginning for the legislature to know kind of what we were talking about, have good data from Chapin Hall about, the cost avoidance of it. So that's really helpful. So not only the helpful process of allowing stakeholders to be in the same room and talk about the program design, which they needed to know for their assumptions for the fiscal analysis, but also to actually know what it's going to cost in your state. And part of that is we have an existing program, former ward, but we weren't leveraging the federal funding for that. And so it ended up being at about $3 million per year for Nebraska. We have about 300 young people that age out every year. So just real quickly, the way that our program is structured, we have eligibility for all 5 education and work conditions. Young people are eligible if they age out of the system at 19, again, that's our age of majority. Or if they exit to independent living at any age, because we have young people that are discharged to independent living before 19, they can be eligible for the extension beginning at 19. We just didn't want them to get left out. Or one of our cleanup bills, this is kind of complicated, allows young people who are guardianship at age 16 or older the option to either receive extended guardianship assistance to age 21, that's kind of the classic what Fostering Connections requires, but also they can choose to go into extended foster care to 21 because it's structured as a voluntary placement agreement, because that program allows them to get the stipend directly and more caseworker support. So that we have that option. Our state plan amendment from the feds has not been approved yet, but we're currently doing it with state dollars. You can see the services that are provided. The monthly stipend is $760 a month. I think that is actually, can't believe it, Nebraska, higher than some other states, but there's a requirement in our bill that it must be at least the foster care maintenance payment they were receiving under 19 to extend, and we recently had a rate increase. So that is attractive to many young people. As I said, the program is voluntary, it's structured as a voluntary placement agreement. That was super important to our young people. And there is court oversight. You don't have to have that with a voluntary placement agreement, but we wanted to kind of have that balance. Young people have a right to court-appointed counsel if they want to have an attorney appointed for them. And then as required, it also provides for the option for extended guardianship and adoption assistance. We have a Bridge to Independence Advisory Committee. I'll talk about that a little bit more. It sits under our Nebraska Children's Commission, which sounds like it's similar to your Children's Cabinet. We put that in the Bridge to Independence bill to continue our stakeholder effort so that that group could make recommendations for the implementation. So HHS let us be really involved in giving feedback on when they were drafting their regulations and policy, and then to provide kind of an ongoing recommendations and kind of monitor data about the program going forward. So last month we just got data from the second year of the program, and now you'll see it's not all like rainbows and unicorns. We have some challenges and some successes. It's actually now about 230 young people in the program. That represents about 89% of eligible young people. So that is a higher uptake rate. That's like a success in my book. That's a higher uptake rate than many other states. So most young people in Nebraska do choose to go in the program when they age out, which is something that a lot of people doubted before. And even young people were like, we want to be done. A lot of people aren't going to do it. We wanted to structure it in a way that was attractive for young people. I think the monthly stipend helps, but I hope that it's also because it's a youth-directed process and that they like that. About 1/3 of young people are made an education condition. They're in school, secondary, post-secondary ed. About 1/3 are employed, and then about 1/3 are in that category of in a program designed to remove barriers to education and employment. About 1/3 of young people in the program are pregnant or parenting. That was like a shocker to me. It shouldn't have been, but it was. I feel like that's high. But that's exactly who we want in the program, so I think that's a success. About 30% of young people had an IEP when they were a minor in foster care, so we have some of those needs. I think this is also a success. HHS says none are homeless. But it depends on how you define that. There are only about, when you look at the month-to-month data, less than 2 young people out of 230 that were in a shelter every month, and then 10 or fewer individuals that were couch surfing. So pretty good improvement on housing there. Caseloads are high. That's an issue that we're dealing with. Our advisory committee recommended that the caseloads be under 15 in rural and under 20 in urban, and that has creeped up due to some budget issues and some turnover we've had recently. And I think we're really seeing that in the program because the case management piece is so critical. And so that's been felt. Another challenge that we have, don't let this worry you, we have a very low penetration rate for 480. I think that is because they're, not to get too wonky, but they're calculating income based off of the parent's income of the home from which they remove the child, not based on the young adult's own income when they come into the extended foster care program. So we're currently working, that's how Mainspring did the analysis. I think it would be much higher if they began to do that, but that's a challenge in drawing down the federal funding that was part of the premise of the program. Yeah.
Does that come from structuring the program such that you close the young person at age 18 and then you reopen them as a head of household for the purposes of 480 penetration rate?
Yes, yes.
So if you made that adaptation, you might go up to like a 90% penetration rate.
And I think that that's how we do it, but I think that's where the confusion is lying for them, because they're saying if it's a new episode, but it is a new case, the way that we structure it. Yeah, but that's a technical piece to be sure of. Yeah. And then we were talking a little bit about this. We don't have a great evaluation of the program. They're using just the regular NIDA. We have recommended NIDA Plus. We have recommended an external evaluation. They're just using NIDA, and even our state agency is saying that's not giving us the data that we need to really look at the outcomes that we're getting for the program. So that's something that we're going to be looking at going forward. We just have some of this descriptive data that I provided. And then most young people, I know it's hard to see, but most young people in our program are residing in shared housing or supervised independent living. Very few are in foster homes. So that was kind of interesting data. A couple of links to take a look at. HHS has a youth-friendly Bridge to Independence website that you can take a look at. Appleseed also created one as well because we made a lot of fact sheets and resources. So there's a section of our Appleseed's website for young people, and then a section of our website for professionals. In the section for young people, we created a Know Your Rights guide, youth-friendly fact sheets, court forms that young people can request a hearing or they can request an attorney. Then the section for professionals has sample court forms, a bench bar guide. We did trainings for judges and stakeholders on all of our coalitions and commissions. We also work with the judicial branch to implement into their kind of docket and their system to make sure that the findings were going in the way that they needed to. So you can take a look at that. There's a lot on both websites. Then Tanya had asked me just to go over, and I know you're probably doing a lot of work in these areas, so I just want to hit on some other opportunities because extension of foster care is just one that should be part of a comprehensive plan to improve outcomes for this population. These are not all. The first is the Strengthening Families Act, and I know that Stephanie was saying you've already done some work on that. That has some great stuff in it in terms of normalcy, implementing the reasonable and prudent parent standard, youth involvement in case planning. ESSA, the Every Student Succeed Act, has some important provisions around school stability. I think the final regs were issued on that on the 28th of November, and the plans are due coming out like the 10th. So there's a lot to be watching for in terms of school stability and the ESSA. Also Medicaid to 26, that's something we've done a lot of work on in Nebraska because we don't have Medicaid expansion there, and so the Medicaid to 26 has been a vital lifeline for our young people. And there will be advocacy opportunities, I'll just say, going forward with the new administration to ensure that that provision is retained in the ACA, and that will be all the more important if the new adult category is repealed. There were some recent regulations issued by the current administration on Medicaid to 26, emphasizing automatic enrollment for this population, so that's something to take a look at. Transition planning, I think, is so important because extended foster care should not just extend the cliff to 21 and let states off the hook for transition planning, which now begins at age 14 under the SFA. So we heard that a lot from young people and stakeholders, that why aren't we doing this stuff before young people age out, and we should. And so I think there's always improvements that can be made in that area. Chafee is a flexible source of funding. It's something that we looked at when we were doing extension and how we were kind of breaking funding. And then homelessness, I just mentioned that because that's something that we started to get involved in our coalitions in Nebraska to say, this is one of the outcomes we're trying to improve, and former foster youth are a significant portion of the homeless population, so how can we get involved in that effort and try to prevent and end youth homelessness and apply the programs that we're working on for the same outcomes and try to have that goal. And Appleseed, we're working on poverty, we're working on foster care, so let's all come together around that effort, and so that's a great opportunity. Yeah, Stephanie.
Back where you were saying about transition planning, do you have any rules or regulations in your state that ensure that it's actually being done?
Yes, great question. She asked if we have any policies and procedures in our state to make sure that's being done. We have tweaked our transition planning statute several times, so it's pretty specific, and the things that HHS has to do in it it's kind of a long list. But I still don't think, we've done a survey of it. We have a group of 300 attorneys or GALs across the state, and we recently surveyed them and said, how's this going from your perspective? Are you seeing transition plans? What do they look like? And it was, still not good. A lot of them were saying, I don't see it, it's boilerplate. So we've tried, but I think we still have a long way to go. But I'd be happy to share some of the language, because I think it would be interesting to you to see all the different kind of pieces that are required to be in that report. So it's a start, because it makes people talk about it. But in terms of kind of robust planning, I don't think we're there yet. And then I want to mention the SPARK campaigns. Kara's been involved with that, and it was mentioned by Lisa. SPARK is the State Policy Advocacy and Reform Center. It's a group of state-based child welfare advocates. It's run through the First Focus, funded by Amy Casey Foundation, and they are launching 2 campaigns in 2017. One is to make sure that all 18-year-olds in foster care, before they exit, have a driver's license, and the other is to improve access to higher education. And so that's a great opportunity to get some technical assistance and look at what other states are doing around those areas in the coming year, if that's something that you want to take a look at. I know Kira's already done some thinking around that. Just to talk quickly about some of the things that we're doing in Nebraska. Again, I think you're doing great things in Rhode Island, so every time I say one of these, you'll be like, oh yeah, we have that. So hopefully it's just helpful to hear what it looks like for us. We have a Nebraska Children's Commission, as I said. That was established by our legislature in 2012 after we had a failed privatization effort. I don't think there's any way to say that. Our HHS committee of the legislature did a really comprehensive investigation and a very lengthy report. And what came out of that was that some of those failures and gaps in the system were because we didn't have stakeholder involvement or a strategic plan for what we were trying to do in child welfare in Nebraska. And so the Nebraska Children's Commission really became a positive vehicle for stakeholder involvement. And so now we are everything has to have stakeholder input, which is great. So there's lots of commission meetings, as many states have, but I think we got the message. There has to be stakeholder involvement, and so our legislature really looks to the recommendations of the Children's Commission for their policies, so we kind of know as advocates. It's got to run through that stakeholder process, and it's got to come out in that Children's Commission report, which is fine, because we want policy that's based on what stakeholders and people are affected or involved with. So the Children's Commission has statutorily designated seats. It's appointed by our governor. It's a legislative branch. It does an annual report. There's multiple committees and work groups under that. One of them is the British Independence Advisory Committee that I mentioned, and then also we have a normalcy task force, which I co-chair, and that is also massive. There are 5 subcommittees, and altogether 100 stakeholders are involved in that process. So we had a bill last session that passed to implement the Strengthening Families Act in Nebraska, and we're already, I'm just getting feedback rolling in today actually, don't want to look at my phone, because feedback on the bill from all of those stakeholders about what a second bill, based on their recommendations, should look like to implement the Strengthening Families Act in Nebraska. I don't want to belabor too much of this. We have a Connected Youth Initiative. That is part of a fund, a grant that Nebraska Children and Families Foundation got through the Social Innovation Fund. It's $15 million over 5 years. It's $5 million federal, $5 million private match, and then $5 million local. And it's really to expand the older youth system of care model that they created through Project Everlast in Omaha to 6 rural communities. It's really exciting. And it's not just youth with foster care experience, it's unconnected youth, so it's homeless, juvenile justice, young people, and it includes central access navigators, really trying to involve our local providers and have community ownership of this population. So there's central access navigation to connect those local communities to the services for this population, opportunity passport, voluntary youth services, and then youth voice. So it's a Project Everlast model that is being kind of now turned over and coming up through those local communities. So that's really exciting, and there's links to the website. We've also had a bill, the same center, the Champion British Independence Bill, brought a package around trafficking. So that's another one, like homelessness, we're really recognizing the overlaps. We have a safe harbor law, there's a task force, there's grants, there's a lot of good work going around that if you're interested. And then connections between our foster care stakeholders and our homelessness continuum of care. So again, it's not all rainbows and glitter, but these are a few things that we've been working on, and I'm sure you are as well. This is from Jim Casey. I just would be remiss if I didn't connect us to the bigger picture. I think my bias, I was saying this earlier, is like, let's make sure that young people have their basic needs met and the public benefit system work. But we know what young people really need is a person. They need permanency, they need someone in their corner, they need someone that can help them out if they have a flat tire. And so that's really the heart and soul of this, and the work that many of you are doing to make sure that we're finding those human connections and that the casework piece is really there, and that our communities are really supporting that. So I thought this was kind of a nice list of those things. And then I just have a few questions for you. There's pictures of our young people speaking. That's the center that introduced the bill there at the bottom, being involved in our work. But just some questions for you going forward. As I said, I know you had a program previously and are looking at extending that, so that's a good opportunity to kind of look at that. How can young people lead the effort and be involved in all stages of the process? What stakeholders are needed at the table? Who are your champions? Just some questions for you to think about going forward. And then here's a bunch of resources. There's a ton out there, so that was really helpful in the process to us as well, and hopefully that will help you to have them all in one place. That's all I have. I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but I'll be here, and thank you for having me.